I've always thought grandmas come in two flavors, potpourri and rosewater.
Just going to be honest, we are artificially resuming this conversation from before we started recording.
You can't tell them that.
You can't just say something like you just said out of context and just roll with it, man.
My grandmas were both rosewater grandmas.
We were talking about Jeopardy. We were talking about the fact that Jeopardy had a common category called potpourri. And then you said you wouldn't know about potpourri without the Jeopardy category called potpourri. And I was like, wait, your grandma never put potpourri out or whatever? And that's when you said the infamous line,
grandmas come in two flavors, rosewater and potpourri.
What is rosewater?
Rosewater is water that smells like roses.
Okay, that's the truth in advertising.
I mean, I think there's probably also like a subgenre of grandma it's a fork of the potpourri branch that's like lavender, like dried lavender. Because that's my English grandmother was a dried lavender. Technically, she wasn't so much on the rosewater.
Somebody swapped out rosewater.h and subbed in lavender.h.
Yep.
And okay, boy.
My grandmother's house always was a little musty smelling.
Ooh, no, that's no good.
Not like dirty musty, but just like old stuff musty.
Yeah, okay, there's a little mothball-y kind of.
Yeah, no, mothballs are kind of acrid. It was more of a kind of like old books, like like bad old book smell that makes you sneeze, and then there's good old book smell that you're like, man, this is a good ass book.
It's like comforting.
It was that one?
Okay, my grandmother kept a very floral house. Let's say very. It was a bit much, but it was not unpleasant. Let's say
it's like the Chuck Berry, the nasal equivalent of the Chuck Berry wall of sound.
Sure.
Like you just hit there and you were like, wow, I know where I am.
It's a lot of mental gymnastics to put that analogy together. But sure. Yeah. What you said.
Look, Brad, you're tired. I get it. You've had a week. Like, when was the last time two consoles landed in the same week? Ever?
I would have to say, I mean, unless I'm missing something, the PlayStation 3 and Wii both released within like 2 days of each other, which I know because I went to New York to cover both of those launches back to back.
But the Xbox in that year had launched a full year before, right?
Yes, the 360 came out a whole year before that stuff.
Yeah, so
the last time around, I want to say they came out a week apart. The PS4 and the Xbox One. I want to say we're right around a week apart. And even then that was like, oh my God, they're going head to head. I can't believe they're launching just a week apart. And now here we are, barely 48 hours separates them. And it's been a ride.
How are you holding up, man? You guys did a lot of video this week over on the other thing you do.
Yeah, we did a lot of streaming this week, a lot of recording stuff, a lot of behind the scenes work too that may not be obvious. That it's been a lot.
Well, those games won't test themselves.
Even without navigating a change in corporate ownership, it would have been a lot.
Yeah.
Tried going through all of your corporate new company onboarding in the middle of all that stuff.
Oh, hey, have you done your harassment training and selected your new healthcare options? Huh. What about your disability insurance, your life insurance, your time off? Oh, wow. Yeah.
I did set up my email account.
Oh, good.
I've got that far. Baby steps.
Nice work. Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad. How's it going, Will?
It's look. Hey, check this out. I'm gonna do a thing with my face that you can see that the audio listeners won't be able to see.
This is gonna play. Oh man, you look a little manic. What is going on there?
But both sides of the face work.
Oh God, what is wrong with me? Congratulations. I'm sorry God, this is how disconnected from daily reality I have been that I completely forgot about your situation, which you seem to have overcome in record time.
Gina's pissed off at me because when she had this like 10, 15 years ago, it was 6 weeks before she was able to move the left side of her face at all. So
did we actually talk about it by name last week?
Maybe not, but
I think you just glossed over it because you sounded normal. So we just didn't touch on it, but
well, maybe we should not talk about this then.
Well, we already talked about it. Now you just have to put a name to it.
Well, okay. So I have Bell's palsy, which is a temporary neurological thing. It's caused by a pinching of a nerve in your upper neck. And it basically causes one half of your face to stop working. And I lost my sense of taste, too, which has been an exciting, like, or smell, I guess, more than taste. I can still taste salt and sweet and all that, but it's been. I've never had that happen before. Even when I have a cold, I can still smell enough that like food tastes like food. And it was profoundly weird to eat like, ice cream and have it be sweet. And you can it lets you separate how much of it is of each sensation is like taste and how much is like texture and then how much is smell. It was very interesting.
It's a real double whammy at this particular time in history to both have the side of your face go numb and also lose your sense of smell. It's like you get to worry that you're having both a stroke and coronavirus at the same time.
I was going to say when I drove to the hospital at 2:00 in the morning or 1:00 in the morning on election morning, like Monday night, Tuesday morning.
Oh my God.
I thought I was having a stroke. So when I got there and they're like, oh, no, it's just Bell's palsy. Everything after that was literally the best news I've ever heard.
Yeah, this is all just gravy at this point.
Yeah. So he was like, he couldn't. And we had masks on and I was making a face because half of my face wasn't working. And the other eye was doing overtime. And he was like, are you okay? You look like you're upset. I was like, no, I'm just really happy. I thought I was going to have like seriously impaired cognitive function or death. So like, hey, your face is going to be jacked up for 3 months. No big deal.
Stick me with some needles, strap some electrodes on, whatever you want to do. It's all just icing from here.
Hashtag winning.
Yes. Hashtag not a stroke.
Not a stroke. Anytime it's not a stroke, that's good news.
That's probably not going to be the episode title.
I hope not. Please make it. No, not the episode title. So yeah, it's a weird episode because you've been slammed. Usually we like figure out what we're going to do earlier in the week or even the week before. And we're kind of like, we were talking about Alex Trebek a little bit. We're going to do a potpourri episode.
Okay, yeah, we're just going to grab bag some stuff here. Let's just talk for a few minutes.
We have a few things. We have some things that like we're going to talk about fixing stuff because I replaced the mouse switches on my Logitech G Pro. I had a bad switch, and I got to learn how to desolder thanks to Twinkle Twinkie in the chat.
I didn't realize that would require any soldering or desoldering. That's interesting to hear. I guess we'll talk about it some more.
We'll talk about that. Talk about like things we've fixed and origins of fixing. And then if we have time, we're going to talk about some tech we're excited about that's coming down the line.
Just some random stuff.
Yeah. But also, hey, shout out to Alex Trebek, who ruled for a long time and was maybe the first nerd I saw on TV as a kid. So love that guy. And yeah.
Real interesting bedside manner he had. I've seen some clips going around of actually, what's weird is a decent number of the clips or photos I've seen of Jeopardy going around are being posted by the people who were on the show at the time. A surprising number of people are just popping up on Twitter going like, oh yeah, here's the clip from when I was on Jeopardy. And it's like, wow, a lot of people have been on Jeopardy apparently.
Well, I mean, look, you and I know at least 2 people that have been on Jeopardy because we worked with one.
Who?
Ted was on Jeopardy.
Really?
And he just tried out. I can't remember, but I know a couple other people who have been on Jeopardy. My friend Gun Fleischman was on Jeopardy a few times, and like a lot of people. I mean, they've done a bazillion seasons of that, and they do like 60 episodes a year or something. So, or sorry, more than that. They do 5 episodes a night for 30 weeks a year. So
5 a night?
5 a week. Sorry.
Okay.
It's a lot of episodes.
Yeah, for sure. But he had that certain like what's the word I'm looking for?
He was just nonplussed. All the time.
Yes. He was a little bit, not cold exactly, but he could be very hard to impress.
Like
you'd get a lot of like somebody would sit there and spend 30 seconds telling him their life story, and he'd be like, "That's it, huh?"
Well, but it wasn't mean though. It was
that's what I'm getting at.
Thanks for sharing.
He was a little blunt. He could be very blunt.
He was kind of like Mr. Rogers, but just like 8% edgier.
Just a slight crotchetiness.
Yeah,
I guess. But
I mean, look, you didn't want to disappoint Alex. Where I would have landed.
Right. I hadn't even started thinking about who might take over, but I saw a push for LeVar Burton, which I was like, that's probably about the best choice I could think of right now.
Look, right now, the leading candidates that I've seen on the internet where no one's opinion matters are, I think, LeVar, who'd be awesome.
Yeah.
And Wolf Blitzer, who had generated my all-time favorite celebrity Jeopardy screenshot, which is like him and Andy Richter. And I can't remember who's in the middle, but Andy Richter has like $35,000 on the board and Wolf Blitzer is like negative 18 grand. And on Celebrity Jeopardy, they get to play Final Jeopardy even if they're negative because celebrities.
Ooh.
Yeah. Anyway.
I've seen that clip go around of that instance for a long time, and I've never actually been able to watch it because I know what happens, just for fear of vicarious embarrassment.
You just feel bad for Wolf, right?
That's
like, yeah.
I can't bring myself to view someone else's shame in such a way. But
anyway,
yeah.
I always loved the potpourri episodes when I was with the potpourri category, because I assumed that was just the questions that like the writers loved, and they couldn't find a slot to put it in normally. So they had like on the whiteboard at the end of the season, there's just a bunch of cards with all these good questions, and they're like, well, fuck it, let's just put it up here. Let's get these done.
Now that we've said the word potpourri enough times, just because this whole podcast is about knowing what things are and how they work. I'm sitting here looking up what goes into potpourri.
Oh, it's like dried herbals, right?
A mixture of dried, naturally fragrant plant materials. But let's see. Allspice, cedar wood shavings, which apparently is a moth repellent. Cinnamon bark, cloves, cypress wood, fennel seeds. Weird. Isn't fennel like a big thing in sausage?
Fennel, like fancy Italian sausage. Yeah, sweet sausage always has a lot of fennel.
Apparently also in potpourri.
It smells nice. Yeah, I got no beef with the fennel.
A lot of stuff here. Jasmine, jujube flowers, juniper wood, lemon peel. You could make potpourri out of just about anything.
You could just take an herbal tea bag and dump that in your drawer and call it a day. Put some bark in there.
You could make potpourri out of tales of fixing gadgets and also some tech you're excited about.
Exactly.
You fixed the switch in your mouse, which is what occasioned the idea of talking about fixing things.
Yeah, the Logitech mice these days are shipping these Omron switches that have a propensity toward double clicking after some use.
Wait, how much is some use? Because like,
I don't know, I've had this one more than a year, probably.
Not to get too deep into it. I mean, I think you received that mouse from Logitech for full disclosure. Is that right?
Yeah, this was I stream the video games on Twitch, and Logitech makes an effort to send free shit to people who stream the video games on Twitch. Ooh. And as part of that transaction, they sent me a Logitech G Pro wireless mouse, which is like it's a high end mouse. It's their lightweight model.
Okay.
And I like it because it's really nice and precise, and it's so light you kind of hardly feel that it's there. So when you're doing like flick shots and stuff like that, you just zap right on the old noggin and dome somebody.
I just wanted to clear that up in the interest of radical transparency.
We don't want the FTC coming down on us.
No, but by the same token, I also just bought a Logitech mouse a couple weeks ago.
With money?
Which is, yes.
Okay.
It's just an MX518.
That's a dope mouse.
It's the Legend Reborn is how they describe it. Because I loved the MX518 back in the day. And I was like, it's weird to be nostalgic about a mouse. And it was $20, so I went and got it because it was on sale. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is like Logitech to me has always been like the rock of mice over the years. But then when I got this thing, like you had this issue with your G Pro and some other people on the Discord had some similar stuff to say that like maybe they're not lasting quite as long as they used to. Like the G5 that I am replacing that just died, I had for a decade. I bought that G5 because I needed a new mouse for StarCraft 2's original release. If that's
I remember when you bought that because you used one on that was on my desk, I think, before you bought it, right?
I think that's right. But the literal decade before that mouse started dying, and so if they're dying faster than a decade now, I'm going to be bummed.
Well, so the thing I found, having reviewed mice for a really long time, is that Logitech has a pretty good reputation for build quality. The thing that they're better at is warranty support. Like I have sent mice. I've called them about mice that were multiple years out of warranty, and they were like, "Yeah, just what's your address? We'll just send you a new one. No need to send the old one back. Just recycle it or whatever."
Wow.
Same thing for like Harmony remotes and stuff like that. So while the devices may not be infallible, because nothing's infallible, and mice and keyboards especially see a lot of abuse in my experience. They're pretty good, assuming you haven't been just outright negligent about fixing flaws in workmanship or stuff like this. And they probably would have replaced this had I don't do warranty stuff on products that people send me for free because that's shitty. Yeah. If it had been something I had bought and it did this and I'd called them, then they would have absolutely replaced it. I have no doubt of that. But as I was getting ready to go buy another mouse, I was like, hey, maybe I'll see about fixing this one, because I like to not put things in the landfill. That seems like a good thing to do. Yeah. And sure enough, there was a guide on YouTube by this guy named, I'll have to look it up and put a link in the show notes, but he's bearded something. And he had a video guide on this exposed me to a whole subculture I didn't know exist that I'm now in love with, of like ultimate mouse weight reduction people.
Okay.
So there was a picture of a G Pro that somebody had taken all of the outside plastic that Logitech provides off. And they built a frame out of carbon fiber and honeycombed the base.
Wow.
And like all that was in the mouse was like a little bit of a hump on the back, like 2 wires you could kind of hump your hand on. And then like wells where you went down and hit pads that were just physically mounted on the switches.
I have to see what this looks like.
And it weighed like 24 grams. It was really light.
Do you have any way that I could Google that right now? Because I really want to see that.
Just search ultralight Logitech G Pro mods.
Ultralight Logitech G Pro carbon fiber.
There you go. So I was looking at that and I was like, okay, that's too far. But he had a good tutorial for switching the switches. And it like the disassembly of the mouse isn't too hard. You have to pull the Teflon feet off and then unscrew like 7 screws and separate the bottom from the top, disconnect a couple of cables, pop out the battery, unscrew the retaining clips that hold the buttons in place, and then pull the buttons out. And then you can access the board, pull the board that the switches are on out and desolder the switches and all that. But the switches are 3-pole switches, which means there's 3 wires that come out of the bottom of the switch, go through holes on the board, and desoldering stuff that has 1 hole, really easy. Desoldering things that have 2 holes, pretty easy. Desoldering things that have 3 holes traditionally has been beyond my skill level.
That's just 1 extra hole.
Yeah, but like with 2, you can kind of heat one up and then lift it up a little bit and wiggle, and then you can heat the other end up and wiggle and just kind of shim it out. But with 3, that doesn't work because the 2 that are still in place will keep it pretty locked down. There's not enough wiggle.
Sure.
So I post on the Discord, and we have a lot of really good electronics people in there. And Twinkle Twinkie, who we've talked about before in regards to mechanical keyboards.
Yes, he's great.
Shared some, like, did a really good thread that I'm actually going to write up and put on like a newsletter or a Medium post or something next week, with a bunch of desoldering tips, like temperature ranges, tools that you need, tools that are optional but will help you a lot. And I ordered the stuff that was recommended. I got a good solder sucker. Hold on.
Will is reaching for his solder sucker, I imagine. He just leaned aggressively out of frame. I am reaching. I hear some chair creaking.
Oh, there it is.
Getting a good look at the back of the container. His chair is very orange.
Okay, it's not here. Never mind. It makes a real good popping noise, and it sucks really good. And it has a removable silicone tip so that it's heat safe at the soldering temperature you're going to use. So you can jam it right up against the soldering iron and like get a good seal, and then pop it loose without taking the soldering iron off. So you don't have to be fast or anything.
And you're literally just suctioning the warm or the liquid solder off, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that reusable, or what would you do with the solder after that?
It kind of falls out. You kind of bang the tip and it just knocks off, and then you throw it in the trash because it might be toxic depending on what kind of solder you use. Because the home solder usually has lead. Commercial solder is usually ROHS compliant, so it doesn't have lead. But anyway,
does it lose its conductivity though? Would you not want to use it again for that purpose?
You don't want to. So you don't want to reuse old solder because the flux is built into the solder usually, and the flux is what makes it flow well.
I see.
So there's it's like an acidy thing that just makes the solder. You know how solder goes from being shiny to like mercury to like kind of matte as it cools. Yeah. That's as the flux burns away. That's what happens.
It burns out. I see.
Yeah. You literally, like, the smoke that comes off solder isn't molten metal. It's the flux burning away.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Okay. Good to know.
So I bought that stuff. I bought some good flux. I think that's it. I think that's all I bought. Twinkle Twinkie recommended a reflow station that was like $35, and I looked at it and I thought, I don't want to have to store this in my house. But I about 2 hours into the desoldering process, and I bought some copper wire to kind of wick up the solder, which is the other way you can get solder out of existing joints. About 2 hours into that desoldering process, I wished I'd spent the $35 because it would have been money well spent, even if I just took it out and threw it in the trash the moment I was done. But I got it all done. It took a really long time. It was frustrating. I need to buy a pair of magnifiers. That's the thing I realized, is that like I've reached the point now where I can't like when I'm doing small work like that, having the magnifiers would be really useful.
Do you have the grabby arms that we've talked about before?
I have the grabby arms. Okay. I already had them. Well, I can post all this stuff in the show notes so that people can find it if they want. And I went down the whole process. It was super good. The mouse is perfect. You wouldn't know that anybody had done anything to it except for I replaced the black feet with the fancy Hyperskids white feet. So
it's nice for something you'll never see because it sits on a desk.
Yeah, but they're a little bit higher than the default one, so it's like I got lifts for my mouse. It's pretty good.
A little bit more glide on there. So it clicks the same. It doesn't click better.
It clicks slightly louder. Okay. Ever so slightly louder. But yeah, I mean, same click.
I guess a mouse click is a mouse click, right?
It's a little bit more hair trigger. Well, no, because it's just like keyboard switches where you can get like different forces and all that.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good, like, I mean, here,
I hear it. Yeah, I hear that click. Yeah. That sounds like a mouse click.
Yeah, it's a pretty good click. I was pleased.
I have a question.
Yes.
That you may or may not have an answer to. When it comes to electronics manufacturing, do you have a good sense of, I mean, I guess we could use the mouse as an example, although we could talk video game consoles or whatever you want. But like, I would love to know, and this probably varies by product, where the automation ends and the human intervention begins. Like, obviously, if it's like if it's a PCB with a bunch of stuff, I'm trying to think of give you some terms here. Resistors, capacitors, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, like
transistors, whatever.
Stuff,
yeah.
I assume a lot of that stuff is assembly line, like robot arms, jamming a lot of that stuff on there. But when you talk about something that has wires being soldered to something, like at what point is it not really practical to automate stuff like that? And humans are having to sit there and finish off that assembly. Do you have any sense of that?
So you can often tell when you look at the boards, because if there's blobs of solder and it's not just like perfectly, like if it's made by machine, like by a pick and place machine, which is like a little robot that picks up the components and puts them on the board and then squirts a little solder on the pads or whatever, and then that board will like roll into an oven or into a special thing that heats up the solder without anything touching it. It's just hot enough to melt the solder but not destroy the devices. Then that puts you in, like, that's made by machine. Most of the time that there's some hand assembly. So for example, like an iPhone is probably assembled entirely by machine at this point, because all the little cables and stuff can be connected by machines. And often if there is hand soldering that looks like it's happened in there, that indicates that maybe it was built someplace that you probably don't want to support because they were using like child labor and stuff like that, which is shitty.
That is kind of the dark side of this question.
Like this is a situation where machines are unequivocally better than not machines. The actual assembly wildly varies, is my understanding. That my data is, let's say, the last time I've had a conversation with this about somebody who knows, and people who are listening probably know better than I do. But as recently as 10 years ago, if you had a multi-plane board, so if you have boards that are like that stack on top of each other, like a Raspberry Pi or a Mister does, where they just kind of slot into things on the board, that's something the machines can do. But if you're talking about a mouse where there's like boards that are on the side for the side buttons, and there's a board up under the front that's at a different angle because of the camber of the buttons, those often have to be assembled by hand on an assembly line. So somebody will be sitting there and will place every single one, or at least we'll make sure that they line up right and chonk them in there.
Cool. That's good to know.
Yeah. The other way that they do the resoldering, the soldering on the machine is called, hold on. It is called wave soldered.
That's like a good motorcycle revving there.
Yeah, well, I'll cut all that bit out probably, but it's called wave soldering, and I don't know what that means. But you can ask Twinkle Twinkie in the Discord. So
yeah, he knows his stuff for sure.
Yeah,
his workstation is pretty serious from what I've seen.
Pretty cool. But yeah, so this is the thing about this was the first time I've ever done a soldering job that I didn't finish and feel like a hack. Like every time I've tried to desolder something complicated before, it often ended with me doing things that are really ill-advised, like getting a drill bit that's the right size and just kind of reaming out the through hole a little bit with that, which is, just to be clear, absolutely not the right way to do that. That is like, it's not going to be good for what you're doing.
Did it work?
Well, yeah. I mean,
you can only complain so much then, right?
Well, but the thing is, you'll reduce the life of the board. So like, on this, I used I used a lot of flux to keep the solder flowing and keep it moving and wick up into the braid and all that. And it took a long time, but at the end, it looked perfectly clean. And when I put the new parts on, they looked like they were meant to be there, even though they were different colors than the switches that I started with. So I was pretty stoked.
I'm just going to ask another question.
Yeah.
Tangential to this, because I guess that's what I do when I hear about things.
That's why we're here.
Yes, I guess so. And again, I apologize. My brain is mush. I'm trying to think how to phrase this question. Like, is there anything, is the PCB part of, or is the board part of a PCB totally inert? Like, as long as you don't see any traces running through a given part of the board, is anything ill? Or are there going to be any ill consequences if you like drilled a hole through that part of the board? You get what I mean? Like, as long as there are no electrical traces or anything similar in that spot.
So it depends on the board. Okay. On a single layer PCB, you're probably fine. My understanding is I've never tried to actually drill through a board because they're a little brittle. So you might explode it doing that. Right, I don't know.
Yeah, this is very theoretical or hypothetical. This is not something you should actually try if you care about the device. Most
modern boards, like the one on a Raspberry Pi or a motherboard or something, or a video card, are multi-layer boards.
Okay, so there's stuff in there.
Instead of having one conductor, it's a sandwich of a piece of fiberglass, a conductor, and then another piece of fiberglass, and there's some stuff in between. And the traces are cuts in that conductive layer. So if you have a multi-layer board where the holes go, where like one hole is connected to level 3 and one hole is connected to level 7, one hole is connected to level 5, you may not be able to see where the traces are in the middle layers. Right. They may just be visible in the top and the bottom layers. So, don't drill holes in motherboards.
Yeah. No, again, I'm not recommending it. I just mean, just theoretically though, if you hit a spot on the board that was nothing but pure fiberglass, like it wouldn't actually affect anything.
Yeah. If it doesn't explode, you're probably fine.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I don't know. Chat will tell me. The Discord will tell me if I'm wrong. We'll have a correction next week. You had talked about learning to fix stuff by like taking apart consoles back in the day.
Floated that idea when you started talking about your mouse. It's just like, maybe we should just talk about our history of taking stuff apart. But I don't know that. I don't know how much I have to talk about there. But yes, modding PlayStations was my very first exposure to soldering.
Ooh,
which I think we've talked about at some point in some capacity, but.
Yeah, your long history of console game piracy has been a topic of conversation.
I did like 3 or 4 of them total in my life, but actually, I don't know how much more there is to say than that. Other than I had a cheap $10 Radio Shack soldering iron that I did it with, and never actually upgraded.
So I never actually did that.
Really?
No, I never had so I skipped from the N64 to the Xbox One, PS2 generation. And I never got a PlayStation. I guess I got a Dreamcast late. Yeah. Well, because I was like, it was the 90s, man. I was into Quake. I didn't want to play any of your Tomb Raiders. I could have played that on the PC. I had a video card.
That's fair.
What was involved with modding the PlayStation?
It was like a 4-wire chip. I forget exactly what it was, like 1 ground wire and 3 whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, you literally just soldered like 4 wires to 4 different points on the board. It was very easy. Pretty hard to mess up.
So did you have to hit like a jumper, or did you hit a pin, like a through hole that was something else, or was it like a place where was it one of those little leads that came off old school CPUs?
Oh gosh, I don't know how to describe it. It's like the kind of the pointy, that's like something was attached on one side of the board and like had a point sticking through to the other. Yeah. Is that a through hole?
That's a through hole.
Okay, because you don't see a hole there, you just see the metal.
The hole's filled with solder.
Okay, so I didn't realize that that's how you would refer to that. But yeah, that's what it was. If I remember, if memory serves. And I've still got my last PlayStation that I modded in the closet somewhere. So theoretically, I could open that thing up and look at it, look at the job I did here 20 years later.
Did you have to do that to play games from Japan?
Yes, like that was region too. That was for everything.
Okay.
And then, gosh, what was it? Eventually, like toward the end, they started shipping games that defeated the mod chips with software.
Like would kill them?
Or it wouldn't boot. It would just like it would not make it to the title screen if it detected the chip.
That's a trip.
Yeah. So that last chip that I put in, I connected it to a toggle switch that would kill the power to the chip.
Oh, really?
So I could still play the games that wouldn't boot because I think Dino Crisis was one of those.
Oh, that's a trip.
Yeah. So drilled out a little hole on the back of my last PlayStation and just screwed a little Radio Shack rocker toggle switch in there. So I can turn the mod chip on and off at will. It's pretty fun.
Huh.
Anyway, I don't know. I think I always second guess on this podcast anytime we talk about a thing like this. Like, we must have talked about this before, right? I have to just be repeating myself from 30 episodes ago.
I mean, we touched on it a little bit early on, I remember, but
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I also don't remember like a pretty substantial chunk of the episodes from like February of this year to maybe April of this year. So
I don't think people understand, when you do this for a living, your capacity to forget all of the things you've said over time. I think people like in my other life, people will be like, "Hey, remember when you gave so and so PS2 game a 6 point whatever?" And I'm like, I don't remember ever playing that game, let alone reviewing it.
Well, it's funny. This is a sidebar, but when I was at Maximum PC, I always thought we had this, when I started, we had this list, like we just kind of casually stuck up a cutoff. We cut off the cover of every magazine of every issue and just stuck them up on the wall in rows of 12 or 13, however many issues we did that year. So, and when we moved offices, I always fought to keep that, to the point that like I got a bunch of poster board and glued them to the poster board so we could pick them up and move them with us, because it was so useful to have a physical reminder of like what work was in which months. Sure, like you just look at the cover and you know, like, here's the 5 things that were in that issue. And then that would prompt everything else that went in that issue.
Right.
And because there were discrete stops, like each issue was a discrete thing, right? Like November 2000 was, I still remember, a first home theater PC build, right? And we would go through those, like having those on the wall where you could glance at them, let you know exactly where, like I could remember where everything was there. And then we started tested and started working on the web where it just never, there's no stop ever. You just always keep going and it's all gone.
I think that is a big part. That's a big part of it, is that, yes, it's just one long unbroken chain of,
yeah.
Anyway. But I started to say, like, I took apart my receiver, my AV receiver a couple of years ago.
The Sony one?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. What for?
It's a long story. I had some work done on it, but then some other stuff got broken in it. So I actually ended up having to buy an entire new faceplate for it. Like, that's kind of what happened, is the faceplate got broken in the process of fixing the big LED display on the front.
Yeah.
So I had to straight up go like find whoever Sony's like warranty parts supplier is and buy a new faceplate from them.
Wow.
So yeah. So I had to take all that stuff apart and reconnect all the ribbon cables and blah, blah, blah.
Those ribbon cables, like the ribbon cables, are the hardest part of taking apart modern stuff, in my experience.
Yeah.
It's really worth, especially if you're taking apart something you haven't done before and you don't know how to do it. It's worth it's worth having nylon spudgers around, which are, they're like little plasticky sticks that are non-conductive and pretty soft. So it's really hard to kind of jack something up, but it's worth learning how those connectors work, because some of them flip up, some of them pull like out away from the socket. Some of them have weird connectors that I've never seen before. Some of them flip up from the far side of the socket. And once you mess those up, you're basically hosed.
Yeah, it was a pretty harrowing process. I'm not going to lie. I was pretty proud that it all worked when I put it back together. Also, the power supply inside that thing looked like something that I should not be anywhere near with a screwdriver or anything else.
That's the way the old TiVos were. I used to do TiVo upgrades for people, for friends. When remember TiVo? That was a thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
People would buy like the 14 hour TiVo or whatever and be like, "Hey, this thing doesn't hold enough. Can you do anything about that?" I was like, "Yeah, I got you. Yeah. Bring me a hard drive and bring your TiVo over here. 10 o'clock behind the Best Buy. We'll take care of you." And then you have to like bless the hard drive.
Yeah, you bless the drive.
Well, you had to take the old drive out. You had to bless the drive.
Yes.
Which basically was like putting some weird file system business on there because it was a Linux machine.
Dark magic.
But those power supplies were just some exposed fat capacitors that look like real heart stoppers if you hit the wrong point on them. So
yeah.
And all sorts of goopy grease stuff there to cool. Anyway.
Indeed. I've got something AV receiver related that I want to talk about that would have made sense in the tech we're excited about part, but I don't know if I should save it for that or not.
I mean, you want to do the tech we're excited about? We can go on.
Like, it's potpourri, man. That's whatever. Right. All bets are off. We can just move into that. Well, okay. It's actually the third item on that list, but I'm just going to read it first because we have got this awkward segue. Here's what I wrote. New TVs, kind of maybe, because consoles, but not really.
Nailed it.
That's
a good read.
Like, I was trying to come up with... Hold
on. Can you do that one, like, a little more enthusiasm about because consoles and a little more dejectedness on but really? Not really.
New TVs, kind of maybe, because consoles, but not really.
Perfect. Nailed
Something
it.
like that.
Okay. We'll ship that one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to come up with some items to populate this list with, and I'm kind of in new TV mode. Not really, but I'm sort of at least thinking about it kind of a little bit.
Well,
because of these consoles.
We went down this path a couple months ago.
Yeah.
And we talked about it a little bit. And then I decided after looking at what was available and like either the amount of money I would have to spend to get all the shit that I want in my next TV or the sacrifices I would have to make to buy a reasonably priced TV that did the things that I wanted. I was just like, fuck it. I'm waiting.
What are the things you want?
Like, well, I want the new HDMI spec.
HDMI 2.1 goes without saying. Like, that's of course. Although, like, the shitty thing, I think we've maybe mentioned this before. The shitty thing is you can have those ports on a TV and still not support all of those features.
Right.
Like, it's possible to like do 4K 120, but not support the variable refresh or the auto low latency. You know, like you could still leave features out of that spec and still say that you're compliant.
Well, so I wanted that. I wanted variable refresh. Ideally, I wanted like a G-Sync or FreeSync type situation that's going to do the smart frame buffer writing, and I wanted all the HDR business. I want something that has actual real black levels, not a bad LCD. Although I think at this point, like the LCDs that do bad black levels don't exist in the even in the low end at big set sizes.
I've been keeping up with the reviews of the God, I want to make sure I keep this straight. The mini LED, not the micro LED, is the magic future technology.
Micro LED is the future. Mini LED is the backlight.
Micro LED is the like successor to OLED. Crazy, awesome tech. Yeah, you're right. Mini LED is just the standard LCD, but with a very high resolution backlight.
Right. Micro LED is when the LEDs are actually the pixels, not.
Yes. Yeah. Which is what OLED is as well. It's just that OLED is made with organic compounds, which is what the O stands for, which my understanding is that's why they tend to degrade faster. Those compounds break down.
Chemistry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, the mini LEDs apparently like they're not OLED, but they're like shockingly good for LCD is what the reviews have been saying that I've been looking at. So
that's what what like TCL and all those guys are shipping, right?
TCL has gone pretty hard into mini LED as a kind of lower cost competitor to OLED.
It's no quantum dot, Brad.
What if you had both?
One cool word and one kind of okay word.
Sure. But anyway, I don't know. It's not really necessary yet. I mean, it's kind of a nice to have, but
The quantum dots or
no, just a new TV.
Oh,
I mean, sorry.
Yeah, I mean it's funny when the end result of that whole conversation for me was that like the thing I was excited about was having HDR, and the TV part of it I could kind of like the higher resolution. Frankly, the higher resolution seems like a real pain in the ass because it seems like everything is kind of poorly supported and like are you going to get 4K worth of pixels across your Apple TV or your Roku or whatever? No, because no streaming service is going to stream 4K at a decent bit rate. It's probably still, anyway. Yeah, I just couldn't be asked.
I am increasingly of the mind that trying to run these console games at native 4K is a fool's errand because like, is it really worth the performance hit? I really don't think so. Like, I think saying that you are running at 4K on the box as a marketing point is way more important than actually doing it in terms of the practical benefit, as opposed to like running it at, let's say, an 1800p with nice upscaling or something like that. Like I don't think you need to actually tax the machine to get native 4K versus the benefit that you're getting.
I mean, the lesson of the 3080 for me is that like I have a 3080 on a Intel i9 9900K, right? 32 gigs of RAM. It is not an insubstantial computer. And in order for me to play something like Watch Dogs Legion at 4K with ray tracing on, I have to do a whole bunch of other stuff. And then the frame rate is like hinky around 30, maybe 45 frames a second.
And again, to be clear, the machine you just described is like pretty significantly better than these consoles.
Yeah. So
like, what does that tell you about how taxing it is to run games at a native 4K?
Well, and at the same time, I'd much rather play I would much rather have a solid 60 frames per second with ray tracing cranked all the way up at 1080p on a 1080p monitor than do the 4K stuff. So yeah, that's where I ended up on that.
And of course, you know, the PC gives you the freedom to actually make those choices. Like on console, you're generally stuck with the 1 or 2 modes that you are provided by the developer. But like the thing I was going to say is like half the people I know with 4K TVs are preferring these performance modes that all these console games are shipping with right now. Like everybody I know is using the performance mode, which a lot of times is like 1080p, just because the frame rate is so much more noticeable than like somewhat higher resolution.
Well, and the upscalers are really good is the thing, even without doing all the machine learning stuff that like DLSS and the DirectX multi-sample machine learning super sampling do.
Well, like even last gen, you had like the checkerboard rendering techniques and stuff like that like help you approximate, you know, a lot of that detail.
Well, and having the colors and having the reflections and all of that stuff is really good, and having the resolution just makes the frame rate bad. So I mean, look, I probably would feel differently if I kind of made a half-assed effort to buy a PS5, and then when the pre-orders were a disaster, I just was like, I'll deal, like when I could go to Target and buy one, I'll do it. I can wait until next year. Like I would love to be playing Miles Morales right now, but I'll happily wait until I have the new console to do that. So yeah, like if I had a new console sitting in my you know, taking up 18 cubic feet on my entertainment center right now, I'd probably be pretty excited about it and might have a different feeling.
So big. And then the last thing, not to ramble about my TV situation all day long, but like I've got a 55 inch and that's probably what I would get in this apartment. I don't think I would want to go to 65 in the size of the living room I have.
You got to think about the future, Brad.
Well, that's the thing. Like that's really what it comes down to for me is like, I'm just not going to buy a TV when I kind of don't want to live in this apartment forever. And I'm just not going to like, nobody wants to move a new TV, you know?
Yeah.
Like just tough it out on the one you got and like give it away or sell it or
put it out on the curb with a free sign on it.
Sidewalk with a free sign. It will last about 15 minutes.
Yeah. Some kid will be so stoked that they'll have in their bedroom a 55-inch 1080p plasma set,
and wait until you get where you're going, and then buy the new TV instead of shipping it once and then shipping it again.
That's it. I mean, because you have to store that box. You don't want to keep that box someplace.
Totally.
Where are you gonna put that?
Like, screw all of that. But in the meantime, 55-inch like 1080p at I would guess 8-9 feet that I sit away from that.
Yeah.
Like, I would guess that's probably pushing most people's capability of noticing the difference at a size and distance of that type. What do you think?
I think you'd probably notice a higher resolution.
You probably see a little bit of difference, but I bet it's right on the edge.
Gary has one of those has a big LG OLED. And when we went over to check that out and have a kiddo play date, the thing that struck me more than the resolution was the HDR. The HDR on HDR content, the HDR is astounding. Like watching Thor Ragnarok or Wonder Woman or Planet Earth or something like that. It was mind blowing.
HDR and 120 hertz are both way more noticeable eye popping features than higher resolution.
Agree. Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah. So anyway, whatever. I'm just we're just rambling about new TVs because it's kind of on the brain. But I can tell you that I've played both of these consoles on that 1080p set, and they look quite good.
And you're getting a real solid frame rate, I bet.
Yes.
Even at the quality settings at that resolution?
Yeah. I mean, well, you know, it's game dependent. It's all entirely up to each developer.
Yeah.
Most of the quality or kind of, you know, they're using different terminology. Some of them it's like resolution mode. Some of them it's like fidelity mode or quality mode or what. Yeah. But typically that's 30 frames a second from what I'm seeing.
Interesting.
The thing I'm noticing is, most of these games, for whatever reason, they use they use a rendering technique that'll just let you flip back and forth without having to like restart a checkpoint or, you know, do a vid _ restart in the Quake 3 parlance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember.
The point is that is letting a lot of people who I wouldn't normally think of as frame rate snobs see the difference in basically real time.
Yeah. And
all of a sudden, a lot of people who previously super didn't give a shit about frame rate are suddenly going like, I can't do it with these resolution modes. Like I have to use performance. I think there's psychologically something going on that makes the lower frame rate look that much worse when you see it side by side, literally flipping it back and forth like that.
Well, it's definitely a thing that I notice more if you can go from slow to fast and then back to slow again. Slow looks bad.
Yes, for sure.
I got a new phone this week, Brad.
Oh,
my iPhone 12 Pro, the upgrade to the sequel to my iPhone Pro 10. or iPhone 10.
Okay.
Which was a 4-year-old phone. This is the 3rd year I'd had the phone. So it came out in 2018.
Is that the same guts? Is that the same guts as the iPhone 8? Which is what I have.
I think it had one newer processor, but maybe it came out the same year as the iPhone 8.
I'm gonna have to look that up. I'm just sitting here thinking if you got rid of that phone, maybe I should also get rid of it.
Well, so I was thinking I wasn't gonna upgrade, and then they had the lidar scanner on the back of the 12 Pro.
Wait, is that what pushed you over the edge?
Yeah, I can use it for work, it turns out.
Oh. Go on. Well, back up. I think we've talked about lidar before, but could refresh my memory.
Yeah. So lidar uses basically uses infrared lasers to scan a room. So imagine a Connect One, but good.
Okay.
And Apple's putting one on the phones because they want to use these for AR positioning, so they can get precise positioning using like there's a couple of different ways to do precise precision inside out tracking in 3D space. One of them is using a lidar sensor. One of them is using SLAM, which uses 2 cameras that are just normal cameras that are spaced at different places, far enough apart that they can do binocular vision and do the math based on image recognition and stuff like that.
SLAM. It's got to be the most aggressive and in-your-face acronym for tech I've ever heard.
Look, you got some SLAM devices in your house. You didn't even know it. You got Connect 2. That's a slammer.
Ooh, boy, it sure was.
You've got a Lenovo Windows mixed reality headset. That's a SLAM device.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so both are good for different things. The lidar stuff lets you do some interesting things that don't work as well with the SLAM, like the scanning. So I downloaded Scandy Pro, which is the kind of the gold standard for iPhone scanning shenanigans, and just waved it around my room and got a 3D mesh of my room in about 15 minutes.
Wow.
So phase 2 is to make a Steam VR load screen that's the room that I'm standing in.
Oh my God.
While I'm using Steam VR.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
How would you square the position though?
I'll have to line it up manually, and then there'll be a little fiddling, but that's a minor problem. You can use the Steam VR advanced tools, whatever that thing's called, to rearrange the room.
So as you're doing the phone waving around and filling in the room, can you see on the screen like how much it's in real time? Like you kind of see where you need to continue waving because it doesn't have enough data. That's incredible. Yeah. So it shows you the camera feed, and then it also. So I have a 3D scanner that I used for this early on in the Foo days. That was made by a place called Structure, the Structure sensor that clipped onto an iPad. And you did that and it was great. But the problem was it lost tracking in 3D space fairly regularly. So you had to go back and then line it back up again, and then it would resume and pick back up. With this, because the accelerometers and gyroscopes are really good and the lidar sensor is fast and presumably there's some hardware acceleration going on in there too for the spatial calculation, so that the AR stuff is rock solid. This, you just kind of move it around and it like paints over. So you start with seeing the camera, like the real light camera of the walls. And then as it builds the mesh, it kind of paints 3D white over that mesh. And when you save it, you see the mesh of your room. You can scan people's heads. You can do all sorts of cool stuff. Any old object, basically.
Anything. So Scandy, I've only done a couple because I'm not paying for Scandy right now because it's kind of expensive. It's like $50 a year, which isn't like. Just to be clear, I paid $500 probably for the structure sensor when it was new. But like it's an incredible tool.
That is kind of insane, actually, that you can do that. It's not, I assume the end result is just a physical model, right? It's not taking any photography and overlaying it on the model.
Oh, it'll skin the model with whatever the pictures of the world are. Yeah, it overlays that pretty well. I haven't gone through and loaded it up into something on my desktop yet. That's the next step. I literally just got it yesterday afternoon at like 8 o'clock. So
finally, you can fulfill the 25-year-long dream of making a Doom level out of your office.
I could make a Doom level out of my whole house. I could just walk around. I mean, it'd be probably not super performing because I'll have way too many polys. But this is one of the things that I'm not excited about for me to use necessarily because I don't have the right skills to make that a useful thing aside from some like easy hacks like making it my Steam VR loading screen or whatever. But I'm super interested, like the every time some piece of novel technology has gone from like an expensive thing that's hard to use to an expensive thing that's easier to use to a cheap thing that anybody can use, like magic stuff has happened. And we've seen that with like, accelerometers and gyroscopes in phones begat drones and 3D and stepper motors and microcontrollers, like Arduino begat 3D printers. And like the fact that now anybody who buys this $1,000 phone can scan, can scan 3D scan stuff for practically nothing, $50 a year from Scandi, is going to be transform. I think it's a transformative technology that like we don't. I have no idea what people are going to use it for, and I'm absolutely fascinated to see. I think the first thing we'll see is a lot more stuff like the stock photo libraries, but for stock 3D scans of weird objects in the world.
That's awesome.
But like, I want to go to museums and scan sculptures and stuff like that, right? Like, I want to get out there and do some weird scans. It doesn't work great on glass or reflective stuff. That's always the problem with lidar that SLAM doesn't necessarily have.
Stands to reason. I assume that end product could be imported into like a Maya or something similar pretty easily.
There are pipelines. Often you'll run it through a thing called Mesh Mixer first, which kind of lets you munge down the so usually on 3D scans, and I haven't used Scandi in a long time, so I don't know how it works now, but it used to be that you imported into a tool that would convert the point cloud into a normal human, like a mesh, basically.
Yeah, right.
And then from there you can munge the mesh down into like a reasonable number of polygons and apply the skin to it and push it out.
Turn dots into faces.
Yeah, I mean, once I got to clean my office up because the area behind the green screen is a horrific mess right now. But once I get through
that's just more complexity to challenge the app with.
It's not. I don't want to show anybody what it looks like back there. It's shameful.
Is it the bad kind of complexity?
It is. Look, it's borderline hoarding at this point. So
okay, fair enough. Two points real quick about this, because everything you just described sounds amazing and like not at all what I expected to hear about the iPhone 12. Like not even close. Point number one, this feels like another major step toward an iPhone just becoming a tricorder. I think so. Like we're getting there.
Yeah.
Just slap some radiation sensors. I mean, I think we talked about that before. It's not like that stuff doesn't exist.
You can get those. Yeah.
Get like turned into a Geiger counter and like 2 or 3 other things. And it's like basically a tricorder.
I think there's a microparticulate sensor in there now too. I can't remember. That might be in the watch.
That's ridiculous. The bigger thing I was going to say, and this maybe is a decent segue into our last little topic here, is the implications for asset generation that has.
Yeah.
For cranking out 3D models from real world objects that you might be able to use pretty quickly.
So I think it's one step further removed from that. So
sure,
if you look at like,
I don't mean you're like going to drop the tea kettle on your stove straight into your Unity level or whatever. But
yeah, we did an episode of the Foo Show where we went in and scanned a bunch of stuff in Adam Savage's shop, and like everything from spacesuits to one of his Maltese Falcons to I don't know, a bunch of stuff. And like those scans came back with as many polys as are in like one of those Unreal levels. Like each scan was like 3 or 4 million polys, which is a lot. It was an incredible amount of data. You're able to clean those up and kind of munge them down and turn a lot of the poly detail into like normal maps and displacement maps and stuff like that. And that gets it to the point that it'll run in real time. But I think what'll happen is, my guess is that somebody is going to build a clearinghouse for these scans and then build some sort of game or something that will get people to do that work for you. And then use those 2 inputs in the output to train a machine learning algorithm to do that stuff at the same time. Because that, like, if the problem right now with doing that is it's hard to get the data, because there's a big difference between there being 500,000 3D scanners in the world and every iPhone 5 years from now having a 3D scanner built into it. Right.
Yes.
So I think my guess is that that's where this is all going to end up.
Yeah. That's what I was getting at. Not that it's going to happen tomorrow, but it's that same process you were just talking about of it goes from expensive and hard to do to expensive and easy to do to cheap and democratized for everybody. And that's when crazy stuff starts happening. So
pretty soon everybody has a podcast, Brad. That's all I'm saying.
Nobody should do that.
We're already there.
Oh my God. I guess you're right.
Brad and Will can have a podcast. Anybody can have a podcast.
Man, truer words have never been spoken. All right. Last thing here.
Yeah. This you showed me this earlier today and it blew my mind.
This did it? Okay. Like I went on one of our Discords and was just like, this looks really good. And I was worried I was being hyperbolic because nobody else really seemed to bite. But then you saw it and
I think they're busy.
You acted similarly. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm not like totally crazy here. But I pulled this because the new consoles came out, and I feel like we have still been kind of fighting through a wave of people going like, when are these going to look like new consoles? You know, it's like, when am I going to see something that looks truly next generation? Which, like, my first response to that is just, do you remember every other console launch in history? This always happens. I mean, it always takes some number of months to years before they really start showing their worth.
I started playing Ghost of Tsushima the other night, which I hadn't played when it came out, and like, that game is the opposite end of that spectrum. Like, that's the difference between that and what a PS4 launch title looks like. Oh my
god, dude, it's
astounding.
Like, it's basically different. It might as well be different hardware. Like to think of The Last of Us 2 and Ghost of Tsushima came out this year up against a knack, or nothing against knack or whatever, but you know, like,
no, fuck knack, dude. Knack sucks.
That happens every generation, though. You know, it's like put Perfect Dark Zero up against whatever the last Gears was that shipped on the 360. You know, it's like, it's always like that. Anyway,
Cameo. I would not. But I'm just saying, I would not have. If you showed me Gears, showed me Ghost of Tsushima in like what 2010, whenever the PS4 came out, and said this is going to run on more or less the same hardware,
right?
I would not have believed it.
Totally. Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. So like. As much as a lot of people are sort of tech skeptics about new consoles, I am always a tech optimist about new consoles. Like, I at least like to think I have enough of an understanding of what the underlying capabilities are to like not like see in my mind what they're going to result in, but at least like know that they're not full of shit, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You know,
well, yeah,
it's like we know how fast these SSDs are. You know, we know what these GPUs can do. Like, we know X, Y, and Z technical specs about these things, and like, we might not be seeing it yet, but like, it's going to manifest sooner or later. Anyway, that's kind of a long-winded preamble for this thing I stumbled on last night, which is like probably the most next-gen looking thing from an actual production game that I have seen so far.
The clip that you shared of the guys running through like the sand field and stuff like that, I wouldn't have realized was from a video game on first glance, except for the animations a little bit like stilted.
You can see just enough of the stilted transitions between one run animation and another. Yeah. But yeah, I first came across this on Twitter on my phone. So it was a small, it was like a small animated GIF on my phone. And I thought, I quite literally thought it was a video of the real world. Yeah. I thought it was like real people running around shot on camera, not a video game.
Are they doing? Is this Unreal or is this their own engine?
I believe it is. Yes, this does say it's Unreal. I wonder, it might be Unreal 5.
It looks like the new like infinite polygon Unreal stuff that Tim Sweeney and they were showing off earlier this year.
We should, I should actually say what we're talking about.
That's probably a good idea.
It's Embark Studio, which is the studio that Patrick Soderlund of DICE and EA founded after he left EA.
Oh, creator of the Frostbite engine.
Sure, yeah.
Oh, I don't know if he was the creator of the Frostbite, but he was at DICE when they were creating Frostbite.
DICE, DICE, like a long time, well-known like rendering house, right? Yeah. Like, they make some of the best looking games in the industry. Anyway, I'm trying to think how to point people to this. I mean, we'll just put it in the show notes, but they put up a blog post, or Patrick did, on Medium. Okay, yeah. You can just go to medium.com/Embark Studios, and the post is called Our Continued Journey.
We'll put it in the show notes too, though.
Yes, but it's just a short, like, how long is this loop? 5, 6, 7 seconds? Just a little short animated GIF here.
Something like that.
But it's like, rendering quality, like lens effects, camera shake, all that stuff, animation, like terrain, kind of surface quality, like all that stuff. It's just probably one of the best looking things I have seen to date on a video game console.
Well, and I mean, was the context for this that like, this is what it's going to look like? This is what like the future it looks like for these consoles? Like this to
that's
me,
that's the game. I mean, like this isn't like a tech test. I mean,
this is a game that they're actually making.
That is their first game.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the thing that's interesting to me about this generation of consoles is the addition of all the ray tracing stuff and the machine learning hardware on the chips. Like in some ways, the 360 and the PS4 generations, the last two generations were like there weren't a lot of leaps because the things that you could do required a lot more work in order to get something out. Like in order to get something, it's not like the old days where the 3D pipelines were fixed function, and like going from the PS1 to the PS2, they added a bunch more stuff to that fixed function pipeline that could do, you know, smoke effects and volumetric fog and all sorts of weird stuff that you hadn't seen before, bump mapping. With the ray tracing and the machine learning stuff, it's a real open field in terms of what's available and how people use it on that hardware. And like, it could be everything from like sound design. It's not like, hey, we can turn on God rays if we're on the right hardware now. It's like, oh, we could use this ray tracing stuff to make an incredible sound field if you're wearing headphones, and make a game that takes place mostly in between your ears and not on the screen if we want. Or we could go completely the other way and like use this new tool to do stuff. And the thing is, it's still so like there's been ray tracing hardware in the market for like 2 years, right? It's still, that's not even a full development cycle for a AAA game at this point, probably.
Right.
It's still so early. We have no idea what people are going to use this for and how they're going to use it.
And like the market reality is that the consoles dictate what gets developed 99% of the time, right? Like occasionally you'll get some, like, you know, the days of Crysis 1 where it's like the tour de force PC only like technical showcase, those days are kind of long gone.
Well, Crysis 1 kind of was a flop because they were the tour de force PC
that's
only.
What I'm saying. Nobody does that anymore. Like what I mean is like consoles that can do ray tracing, which dictate largely what types of games get developed, have been on the market for 48 hours, right?
Yeah.
So like a large scale application of these techniques is just starting.
Well, but at the same time, because the tools are a little bit easier to use, you see stuff like Ghost Runner where they're doing ray tracing in like a kind of small scale. It's not an indie game. I don't know. I don't know where 3D Realms falls these days, but it's just that seems like a small studio game, and they punched way above their weight because they were able to use this stuff really effectively.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see indies and smaller studios and see what they're going to do with some of this tech and some of these APIs. Yeah.
And the nice thing about the ray tracing stuff is, for the most part, it degrades gracefully if you're playing on hardware that doesn't have it. So it just turns off and you replace it with the normal specular maps and you know, reflection maps and stuff like that. And it doesn't look quite as cool, but it still plays the same. And I haven't been this excited about new consoles in a long time, even though I didn't pony up for either.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. Even though there's not that much at launch to actually show that stuff off right now. But
dude, you got a new that Spider-Man, like it's hard for me to be bummed about the launch situation when like you have Bugsnax and Spider-Man on the PS5.
Well, I mean purely from a technical standpoint.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Most of these, with the exception of Demon Souls and like Godfall, I think like every single other one of those games at launch also runs on the previous gen console. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Everything practically everything that's out still has a foot in the previous generation right now.
Well, it turns out
trying to satisfy that demand from a lot of people of like, I want to see something that really looks new.
Yeah.
Like this game, which apparently still doesn't have an announced title, that Embark put up in this post, like just this like 7-second animated GIF, is by far the newest ass looking thing I have seen graphically.
It looks like a Star Wars. Yeah.
But that's actually not the thing I really got interested in reading this post.
Yeah.
Again, and I don't want to oversell it. I mean, like this footage they put out is very iterative, you know, like it very much looks like a much better version of the types of, you know, Battlefield and Battlefront games that DICE was doing for years already.
And they do the clip thing where they're like, it's just a bunch of short takes. So you can't really look at anything long enough to get a good look at it, which
might be a little bit of clever trickery. I don't know. But the thing that I'm really interested in, though, is if you scroll down the page a little bit to this shot of a bunch of character models that they've got.
Yeah, this is a trip.
Like, this is the stuff that actually got me excited, because they have a shot here that of a bunch of quite nice. I mean, I think they look like quite nicely realistic human character models. I don't know what you think, but the caption says, "Our procedurally aided and non-destructive character pipeline tool has significantly reduced the time it takes for us to create and iterate on in-game characters." And there's a whole section of this article here that talks about, I'll just kind of read from it real fast. "Traditionally, the biggest chunk of time in game development is centered around simply producing and polishing game assets. For large AAA games, this is painstakingly tedious, involving a lot of manual and boring work, and a big reason why burnout and crunch is such a prevalent problem for the industry. To solve this in the long term, we need to become smarter about the way we build games. This is the exciting part. Right now, there's a combination of technical breakthroughs happening in tandem in fields like proceduralism and reinforcement learning that will lead to a big shift in how we're able to create and scale game content. Our ambition as a studio is to make use of these breakthroughs and remove as many of the tedious manual tasks from our own workflows as possible. In certain areas like hard surface modeling or character creation, our artists are now able to create content in days where it used to take weeks by applying procedural tools.
It looks like, have you ever seen that Twitter account, This Person Does Not Exist?
Yes. They look like faces from that.
It looks like they've built that.
Totally. For
maybe
games,
with some sliders that they can control.
Yes, for like to spit out. And those are like probably 2D images that stuff like that Twitter account is spitting out. And these are 3D character models.
Well, but I think that in order for that Twitter account to work, it has to, like, the machine learning thing has an idea of what the 3D shape of a face should look like. Sure. Yeah. And occasionally it makes a nightmare. Of course. Oh yeah. We've talked about some.
I mean, I'm sure this will not too. Exist.
Yeah.
But I've just been curious conceptually about this for a long time, and I wish I got a chance to talk to more game developers than I do. But just the idea of procedural generation in your asset pipeline, I assume reinforcement learning is a synonym for machine learning.
Machine learning stuff is my understanding.
Neural net type stuff.
Well, I mean, a lot of times when you do game stuff, like if you're painting terrain in Unreal Engine or something like that, right? Like you're just applying layers of a map, and like one of those layers is often a noise layer to add just, you know, the kind of randomness that exists in the real world, right? Like imperfections in the earth and, you know, trails and stuff like that. This is a trip. This is really cool.
There's another, not to go on and on about this, but there's a blog from like a year ago that I had not seen that they linked to off of this blog post. That has a little like 45-second video of a terrain that they created with some of these tools. Oh, and if you go look at it, I'm sorry, I'm pulling it up right now. It's one of the nicest, it might be the nicest looking 3D environment that would be appropriate for a game that I've ever seen. And they say that it took 3 artists like 2 or 3 weeks to make. So it seems like, yeah, I don't know, whatever. I'm quickly getting out of my league here, but it seems like the potential for these tools to empower artists to really just completely go crazy with their creativity and not be hamstrung by, like, you know, again, the tedium of the workload. Well, like you said, could be huge.
Yeah, I mean, I think the goal isn't to take the artist's hand out of any of this work.
No, not at all.
The goal is to give them more time to work on the things that matter versus the kind of scut work of,
right.
You know,
it's just it's just a way of more like fully expressing whatever vision they have. Right.
I'm very into this, and this is all Unreal Engine. So
yeah,
what a cool thing.
Yeah, there's some cool looking shit. And again, like both from a human perspective and from a technical and artistic perspective, the idea of being able to make more and better looking stuff without burning people out and get more of it into every game, like that's just like extremely cool in every aspect.
It's just another reason that Spelunky is going to be the game that changed the games industry most.
I guess you're right. One last tidbit I just thought of. I was talking to some people on the Discord about this morning, and someone pointed out on there, with the insanely high SSD speeds in these machines, when you've got this much more detail being produced for your games, you can stream so much of it into memory so much faster. Like you can pack more detail, more variety into very small areas and just stream in and out as you move around much faster than you could before. So
games are like games are going to get so big.
It seems like the richness and variety of detail you're going to be seeing in games in like 2 to 3 years is going to be pretty eye opening.
It's exciting because the impact of machine learning in this instance and associated technologies is, you know, there's hopefully, I mean, it's not going to happen because the games industry sucks in a lot of ways, and there's always horrible crunch for the art teams and the programmers and everybody. But
yeah, like I don't mean to imply this is going to like solve crunch or anything like that, but
I mean, yeah, at least. I mean, if it shifts things from things that are less fulfilling to work on to things that are more fulfilling to work on, that's good. That's a good thing. Totally.
Yeah. Stuff looks exciting.
Well, cool. Well, Brad, this has been fun. We should do this again next week.
Yeah. Maybe we should okay, sure. Maybe we should just show up and talk sometimes and see what happens.
As always, thanks to all of our patrons. There are something like, hold on. Oh, I clicked the wrong button. there are something like 1,275 of y'all right now.
That's a good number.
So thank you all so much. And we love chatting with you in the Discord. I said it about, we talked about it last week. By the way, I made that parenting channel last week after we recorded the show and then meant to unlock it once we posted and forgot until somebody reminded me later this week. So it's up now.
It's just been sitting there.
It's been popping off. People are sharing like everything from like what their strategy is for screens and for young kids to like dealing with teenagers, which seems like a nightmare. You can check that out. It's all the way at the bottom in the real life section. Thank you, as always, to our executive producer level patrons, Jacob Chappell, Andrew Cotton, and David Allen. We really appreciate you guys, but we also appreciate everybody, whether you're posting in the Discord or supporting us on the Patreon, or just sharing the podcast with your friends if you can't support the Patreon right now.
Yeah, thank you so much.
The parenting channel, I've spent a lot of time in since I remembered to flip the switch on it. And man, huge shout out to everybody who posted desoldering tips, because I would have really fucked up that mouse if I had not. And that's nice, because now the one that's coming is a spare instead of a replacement. So
it's always nice to have.
Yeah. I guess we'll be back next week. We're coming up on Thanksgiving. Oh, the other thing is, people last week after we did the Patreon episode last month and we talked a little bit about Thanksgiving, convinced me to post Thanksgiving recipes. So I'll post them in the food channel. And I'm probably going to do a blog post or an email newsletter or something like that. So I have to
avoid the food channel. Why? My secret confession. I have not been in there in months because it makes me very hungry and very jealous.
No, look, man, if we can't eat, look, one of the things, it's funny, Gina and I, we're talking about this the other day, but we're both really sick of eating our own food, like the food that we make.
Yeah.
So we're in the lead up to Thanksgiving, we're going to do an eat out week, because we have to buy a bunch of groceries way in advance, and we would want to have space in the fridge for regular meals. And then we're hoping to work that out of our system and get back on the cooking at home train for Thanksgiving.
Reverse palate cleanser, you might say.
Exactly.
Now I'm scrolling through the food channel.
It's really good. It's a good channel.
And it's dinner time. We got to get out of here.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. We will see you all next week with another episode of Brad and Will in a Tech Pod.
Oh, that salmon looks so good.
Salmon's good, man. Salmon's real good. See you, Brad.